Everybody, welcome back. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of REST and what it means to be RESTful, since I know we're kind of talking about that in terms of APIs and even cloud functions before, but we really haven't talked about what a standard RESTful service is. Now, this is not specific to cloud. It is not specific to um, anything serverless. It is something that has been around for a long time. And if you've ever worked with any kind of web application, you may have come across RESTful calls. Um, Other technologies from way back when were SOAP-based, if we remember those. But REST is one of the big ones right now. And I want to kind of give you an overview of what that means. And I'm going to show you a simple little demo that we can do with Python. We'll be using the Flask server for that. So first of all, let's look at a actual Flask call. Now, make it bigger. Flask, and I've got this from, I think it's the Towards Data Science. It's in the blog post, the attribution for this image. Um, what is a RESTful call? Basically, we are going to use the HTML URL for how we're making our requests. We can send post information, we can send get information. We can basically interact with a web service like you would in a normal web application, but we can do this programmatically. So let's actually break down what a RESTful call looks like for an application or for a web service. So you see here, we have a standard URL, right? So this looks like, HTTP, that's your protocol, HTTP, HTTPS, maybe something else if your server supports that, but that's how your server knows how to access it. Then you have your domain name. This could be a raw IP address. This could be a domain name pointing at, say, like cloudfunctions.net or whatever your domain is. The point is, this is just a server somewhere, right? This is probably registered with the registrar. It shows you, okay, go through the com registrar, go through the company name, go to the server that's running the www interface, whether it's Apache or IIS or whatever it is, doesn't matter. This is infrastructure here. We don't care about that. But that's our server. After that, we get to the things that interest us. We actually have to figure out what the route is and what the actual action we have to do is. And this is where things become RESTful. Here you see API, v3, jobs, data science. So everything leading up to the last bit we could consider a path, and then the last bit would be the endpoint. Or more simply, it's what our application is doing once we figure out this is the route that we are at. So again, this first preamble here is how we get to the actual server. The server is then running some application that can break down that path and route it to the correct part of the application. This example here is probably a blog of some kind that it's demonstrating, right? So we are maybe showing something related to the third version of our API, and we're listing out jobs in data science. Maybe if we change this endpoint to another keyword, we'd be getting jobs in another domain, right? We're actually leveraging the URL here to actually get that information. Now, what makes this RESTful is that you have a client sending a request of some kind to an API, and we're talking about APIs here, right? The API is breaking down this route and this endpoint, and it's figuring out what we have to do. Do we query a database? Do we do some kind of processing? Do we return a sensor value? Whatever we're doing, the API is in charge of figuring that out and then returning a response back to the client. This could be a JSON packet, could be an HTML status code, it could be really anything as long as the client understands how to accept it. So that's basically all REST is. We're leveraging HTML and the power that we have with sending information to and from servers. So let's take a look at a short example here. So I've got this link up in the blog post, but I'm gonna just use their code verbatim and kind of walk you through how it works because it's pretty straightforward, solid code. But all you're doing is building a very simple RESTful API with Python. And if you're not familiar with Flask, it is a very low, um, it's very small memory footprint web server that you can run using Python. Liken it to something a lot more heavy-handed like Apache or IIS. You can host websites, you can host APIs. it's a very nice thing if you want to run a web framework in Python. So I've got their code. I just, again, copy and pasted verbatim from them, and I'll link to this in our post as well. But what we've got going on here is a little bit of preamble here. Let's import Flask. Again, Flask is the web server. Create a Flask application. And then we're going to create two different routes. So if I access my local web server with nothing after the basically IP address, I'm going to get server works, meaning that the route is returning information that our server works. If I put in /greet, it's going to return hello from server. Think of this like if you're running a web server and you have a folder in your web directory. I'm putting nothing. The index.html would return server works. If I had a folder called greet, the index.html in there would say hello from server. So what I'm going to do is I've gone through this already and I've set up my environment to mimic what they've done. I've installed Flask. I've created the minimal application. I've set my variables appropriately. What I'm going to do now is Python 3-m flask run. So basically, I'm going to run my local web server. And this is one way you can do that with Flask. There are multiple ways to run a Flask server. I told it to run main1.py. That was the script I just showed you. We see that it is running. Here's my URL, 127.0.0.1. That's your local host. That's your computer running on port 5000. If I go ahead and refresh this now, I should see hello. Not sure why it's taking so long to load. Localhost 5000. Okay, it got stuck. Server works. So that is our basic route, right? If we put in /greet, I now get hello from server. Makes sense, right? And if I look at my terminal here, I actually see these get calls and I see the status code 200, meaning it's working. Right, let's pop open another terminal here. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And I'm going to use curl. Remember, we can talk with services through curl. I'm going to say localhost to localhost and 127.0.0.1 are the same thing. 5000. Server works. Great. I can say /greet. Hello from server. I could do this call through Python, bring it into a variable, and do other things that I need to do with it. You know, I could say get temperature in room if I wanted to. So this thing works, which is delightful. All right, and if I stop the server, we get a page not found because the server is not running, right? Now, let's update this really quickly. I've got this one of the second scripts here where we have some other things going on. So instead of two simple routes, we have hello, greetings from a different endpoint. We can add some variables in. So I can say /user and then username. And by putting these tags in here, I can make it generic. I can route somebody to a particular post where I'm expecting an integer value. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to update my environment variable. So my Flask app is now main2.py. And I'm going to run my Flask application again. We see now it's running my second script. Normally you just have one script for this. But, okay, this is good. It refreshed itself. Localhost 5000 greet requested URL is not found. If I look at my server here, I see a 404 error. We couldn't find that endpoint, right? Because we never defined it. Let me clear this out. If we there we go. All right. Now, if we look in main2.py again, we don't see a route to greet. So it makes sense that it's not found. 404 is the HTTP status code that we could check to see, hey, did we miss something? But if I just go to the homepage, it should say hello. And now it's going to have problems because it's refreshing itself. This only happens when we're recording. It seems like it's getting stuck for some reason. All right. It's homepage, is index page, right? If I throw in /hello and I type it correctly, hello, greetings from a different endpoint, right? So these are endpoints. If you remember cloud endpoint in the blog, that's what Google's doing. I can add in variables. Again, we're not really doing anything here, so /user/Eric, but our API is routing things. I could call another cloud service if I detect this RESTful call here, right? I could say, let's get information about this post/10. The script only returns 10, but I could say post/delete/10, and then that might go into a database and delete entry 10. So this is kind of a short demo on RESTful calls. There is not a lot of magic trickery behind it. We're basically just parsing out a URL and figuring out what to do with that. The API is your nifty little interface to the rest of the magic behind the scenes. Anyway, hope this was useful for you. The code that I've put up will be linked in the blog with some instructions on how to run Flask if you want. And I also have links to the Medium article where they go through a lot more than just very, very simple routes. So, bye everybody.